Hello, my name's Rob and I'm part of the clergy team here in Portishead. It's really nice to have you with me as I share a thought for this week. Through October here in St Nicholas and St Peter's, we are marking Creation Tide. It feels really important to have a few weeks in the year which we particularly remember God as creator. The world that we live in is in quite a mess, and so we respond to that in part by reflecting on how we can remember that it's God who made this world and everything in it. I'm going to share some words now from the book of Job. And they come just towards the end of the book of Job. You may know that Job is a story of a man who lost everything and really is pretty desperate. And he gets some pretty dreadful advice from his friends. And then after quite a lot of chapters of this, of crying out to God, God answers him. And I'm just going to read a few verses from Job chapter 38 and 39, which just sum up something of what God says in these chapters. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the heavenly beings shouted for joy. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the deer? Can you number the months that they fulfill? And do you know the time when they give birth? Is it by your wisdom that the hawk soars and spreads its wings towards the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes its nest on high? God is teasing Job a little bit there, asking if he knows and understands how all created things came to be, or whether he was responsible for it. God is, of course, reminding him that he, God, is the one who is responsible for all created things. And that, of course, is a really important thing to remember. And as God's people, we believe that we are called to share that love for and concern for this world in all its beauty, its majesty, and sometimes strangeness. And yet we know that human activity has made rather a mess of the world that we live in. It really is hanging in the balance as we consider what sort of world will be there for our children, our grandchildren, and their children. So how should we, as followers of Jesus, respond? Well, let me offer 5 words to you now, very briefly. 4 of those come in pairs, and then 1 word stands alone at the end. So, first of all, 2 words: honesty and hope. As God's people, we need to be honest about the state of the world that we live in. We need to recognise that it is, as Paul writes in Romans, it's groaning It really is groaning under the strain of human activity and abuse and misuse. And yet, we are also people of hope. We don't give up. We recognize that God promises that He will come and He will restore. That doesn't mean that we need to not worry about what happens to the world. We need to worry and be deeply concerned. But we do recognize that God will come and will restore all things. He will restore creation. The next two words are denial and despair. I find myself moving easily between each of these. It's so easy to deny that there's a problem, or indeed to think that somebody else will do something about it. But when, on those rare occasions that I allow myself to look foursquare at the situation, it's so easy to sink into despair, to think it's all awful, it's helpless, it's hopeless, and what can me, do about it? And it seems to me that as Christians, we need to have a spirituality, a way of praying that enables us to walk the line between denial and despair, to recognize the reality of the problem and yet to trust in God, and not to be like rabbits in the headlights, unable to do anything. Which leads us to our fifth word, which is action. We really have to do something. We can't leave it to other people. All of us have a responsibility to take action. And that action can take many and various forms. Of course, it requires us to make lifestyle choices, to change the way that we live, to change the way that we go on holiday, if we're fortunate enough to be able to do so, to change the way that we get about the place. Do we really need to use our cars as much as we do? To change the food that we eat. Here in the global north, we eat way too much meat and dairy. We need to be prepared to stand up and make an issue of these things, to write to our MP and the Prime Minister and anybody else we can think of, to look at what campaigning agencies do. People like Christian Aid, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth. And finally, perhaps we need to be prepared to stand up and be counted. I don't know about you, but one of the things that I find really hard is the thought of standing up and making a noise and being seen to be campaigning on these issues. Because I know that, well, I don't do everything that I could do to live a more sustainable and ecologically friendly life. It feels hypocritical. And yet we know that if the world is going to change, it needs to come through structural change. It can't just happen because I decide to ride my bicycle or give up meat. There have to be bigger and wider changes. And for that to happen, we need to be prepared to stand up and be counted. I wonder what it is that you find hardest about the idea of standing up and taking action and asking those in authority to really make a difference and to change things. It's worth noticing that, having a look and recognizing that it's there in order to be able to change and really be willing to make a difference and to be seen to do so. But to take us back to where we began, we do this because we know this world is God's. We know that he loves us and he loves it. He loves all people. And therefore, he invites us to be part of the process of loving that creation. Let's do what we can do by the power of God's Spirit.